What's up everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Console Wars, and today we are looking at the PS5 and the Xbox Series X to see which one stacks up for the new generation. Now unfortunately, I'm a little strapped on cash right now, but I've come up with a foolproof method to be able to afford both of these consoles. Console wars are such a beautiful thing, as they're great conversation starters in the video game industry. Ever since home consoles started to compete against one another, fans of their home console would always rant and argue about which console was superior. Maybe it was the Genesis versus the Famicom, or the PS1 versus the Nintendo 64. But the topic I've heard for the most of my life has gotta be PlayStation versus Xbox. Ever since 2006, these companies have been duking it out with each other during the 7th generation of consoles. Arguments were rampant during this era. PlayStation has no games, Xbox 360 makes you pay for online, and the Nintendo Wii is not in the running. I mean, come on, this console had Boogie with motion controls. Do you really think Microsoft and Sony could compete? However, both of these consoles turned out to be monumental successes, with the console war bleeding over to the next two generations. PS4 having a massive library of games, while the Xbox introduced Game Pass to keep the debate lively. But now we're on to a brand new console generation, the 9th generation of video game consoles. It's still a hot debate if the Switch is considered the 9th generation of consoles since it came out 3.5 years before its predecessors, but while I sit here behind the curve playing Puyo Puyo Tetris on my Switch, I wanted to take a look at not just the consoles themselves, but what we can look forward to in the year ahead, the predictions for what we can see, and how absolutely terrible this video will age. So let's go ahead and take a look at both of these consoles right out of the gate, and the first thing I want to say is whoever named the Xbox Series X is either an absolute moron or an absolute genius. Xbox has been preaching that the Xbox will be a collective experience to bring together the video game industry and put the players in charge. So why the hell would you give the series a confusing title? You know GameStop is going to get thousands of returns because parents don't know the difference. Hell, I barely know the difference. But despite that, the PS5 and Xbox Series X both boast fantastic performance power, with the Xbox Series X slightly edging out in this regard. Both support 4K ultra high definition and ray tracing, delivering the closest thing we've had to a cinematic experience on a video game console. Design-wise, both consoles do have a nice sleek design. However, I do think the white futuristic look of the PS5 edges out against the Xbox, so long as you don't put it on its side, because then it just looks like this head of a monstrosity, oddly shaped robot. Now this is all fine and dandy, but what about the games? I'd say if you want a great catalog of games right out of the bat, PS5 is still the definite choice, with Demon's Souls debatably being the best looking game at the start of this generation. It's hard imagining that this game from 2009 is the graphical powerhouse pushing this console forward. But if you're not into the Souls genre, then PlayStation also offers Spider-Man Miles Morales, which looks absolutely beautiful. Bugsnax is also a cute little photography adventure, and Sackboy makes his return in a big adventure. All this comes alongside many of your PS4 exclusives coming over as well, some being upscaled to a higher resolution and much shorter loading times across the board. Now Xbox on the other hand unfortunately doesn't have as many launch titles to offer, but games like Black Ops Cold War and Assassin's Creed Valhalla are already out and look absolutely amazing. But Xbox has done a fairly good job at upscaling and creating a massive library of backwards compatible games that are immediately available at launch, which pales in comparison to the fact that for the first time in history, we're finally able to play Sonic Unleashed without frame rate drops, thank God. But now I need to talk about my predictions and what I think is actually going to happen with this new console generation. And obviously Skyrim's going to be ported to the next gen consoles, but this does lead to an interesting talking point because Bethesda is a wild card in recent news. Bethesda is definitely the anomaly and company to watch this generation, as the Skyrim and Fallout developer was recently acquired by Xbox Studios in September of 2020. To spell out what this means, the Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Wolfenstein, Doom, Dishonored, and the highly anticipated new IP Starfield have all been acquired by Xbox Game Studios. Now hypothetically, if all of these games were to be on Game Pass, this could spell massive trouble for Sony. Sony might have an extensive catalog of amazing studios, however their subscription service was severely lacking for the PS4 generation. With the sheer number of games on the market nowadays, especially the rise of indie titles, if Sony doesn't come up with a plan of action for subscription services, it could be spelling game over and losing a lot of potential families to Xbox. Now Game Pass is an excellent platform that Xbox has, but I do think they're going to expand on it even further. Right now you can play hundreds of games on PC and Xbox, with crossplay between the two systems being implemented across many titles, but what if we were to add a third option to this? I mean, come on, you knew you saw this coming. Imagine playing the Master Chief Collection, but you're playing it on on Switch anywhere that you want. Nintendo fans have been clamoring for Game Pass to be introduced onto the Switch for quite a while, and I do think that Microsoft is going to try and welcome the Switch to the Xbox family, but not in the form of Game Pass. You see, the problem that presents itself is that Xbox and PC coincide with each other. Whatever you can play on one console, you can play on another. But with that in mind, do you truly think you'd be able to run Cyberpunk 2077 on a Switch? There would have to be a lot of technical work to bring Game Pass to Switch, as the Switch wouldn't be able to run every single game available. One example is that Joy-Cons and Switch Lites don't have analog triggers. Now, having to change this for a single game wouldn't be a problem, but for an entire catalog of games, this would be a development nightmare. Even Moon Studios, creator of Ori and the Blind Forest, commented that their Switch port almost didn't happen due to the developers having such a hard time configuring the new hardware. I'm sure we could see Xbox's popular titles such as Halo and Rare Replay coming to Switch, seeing as Banjo and Conquer made their home debut on the Nintendo 64. But as for the entirety of Game Pass, I'm gonna have to give a big props not on this one. Now, PlayStation doesn't really need to worry about games. They already have an extensive catalog under their belt, with numerous more coming in the future. Horizon Forbidden West looks absolutely gorgeous. Gran Turismo 7 is looking to turn around the low sales numbers from Gran Turismo 6. And I'll be honest, sometimes when I see the aerial views, I forget this is a video game. We're also expected to see Ratchet & Clank, a series that we haven't seen a true continuation of since Into the Nexus in 2013, which is a bit unexpected. I don't see many people talking about Ratchet & Clank, but I'm sure there's someone out there who's a big fan of the series. Fun fact, GameStop actually gave me the wrong case a long time ago and I never got another one. But in seriousness, this is a fantastic series that truly deserves the recognition. I'm really hoping we see some spectacular gameplay from Rift Apart, because this series truly deserves to be loved by a young new audience, especially since it was overshadowed by the abundance of online shooters in the PS3 360 era. But Sony also has the upcoming God of War sequel, a follow-up to one of the most critically acclaimed games of the PS4. Now, we don't know anything about this except for it's called Ragnarok and it's slated for a 2021 release, but if it's anything like the first one, we're looking at a major system seller here. PlayStation also has Final Fantasy 16 coming out in 2021, which means it'll actually come out in 2024. Now, this is neat and all, but I don't know, I've been very underwhelmed with many of Square Enix's titles in recent years, such as this, and this, but not this. However, I didn't like this. But Square Enix has a very dedicated fan base, and hopefully they can deliver a spectacle of an experience for this new generation. And speaking of Square, they're known as one of the longest running Japanese studios, which is a large step that Sony has against Xbox. Sony has done a great job at appealing to the Japanese fan base. With Xbox, well, Xbox I can safely state is an absolute failure in Japan. The Xbox One barely sold over 100,000 units, which is the primary reason you don't see games like Project Diva, Danganronpa, and Persona 5 coming to other consoles. Due to the sheer abundance of advertising from Nintendo and Sony, Microsoft just can't hold a candle to the competition in Japan. However, PC gaming is becoming a much more viable option with the rising popularity of streaming and mainstream media. PC shops have actually been popping up all around metropolitan cities and famous hubs like Akihabara, where you can essentially walk into a 2-story building and create a whole computer from scratch. I think this will be a main topic that Xbox is going to try to focus on, because outside of America, they're severely lacking in the market. Now, if I had to make one last prediction on what I think is going to happen, on the PS5 side, Sony has to find a better way to compete with Xbox's Game Pass. Sony has stated that it'll take approximately 3 years to fully transition into the PS5 era, and I think this means not only expanding to a subscription service that's, well, not garbage, but expanding to PC games as well. Sony has always been stringent on its properties and outsourcing, but with the release of Horizon Zero Dawn on PC, Sony was able to see how the market for PC gaming fares with PlayStation. And simply in the first month, Horizon sold 700,000 copies at a $50 price point. That's amazing. I would guess that their smaller studios and titles made by third party will start this first. I think Bloodborne would be a great suit for this, but I'd also guess that most likely we'll continue to see the 1 year of console exclusivity for its major titles before they're ported over. Now, as far as crossplay, this is something that Sony's been heavily criticized with during the PlayStation 4 era. Sony has always been very dismissive towards any mention of cross-platform gaming, but I feel like that'll change with the PS5. For one, consoles don't make as much money as they used to back then. How many copies the PS4 sold doesn't matter as how much the software and games themselves did. Focusing on expanding the PlayStation brand is by far the smarter move. And second, from the ever-growing pressure of fans and third-party studios, the video game industry is going towards towards a more collective experience. With that in mind, Sony will eventually have to bite the bullet before fans of the company start to lose interest. Now, with Xbox on the other hand, I believe they'll continue to grow their Xbox studio and acquire more properties. See, Xbox has slowly been expanding their roster of studios, picking up Double Fine and Ninja Theory late in the Xbox One's life cycle. So it's only natural to see this happen, especially after the Bethesda acquisition. However, I can almost guarantee you that you can expect to see the relationship between Xbox and Nintendo grow even more. Alongside Ori and the Blind Forest, we've also seen Cuphead come to the Switch, so don't be surprised when you see other IPs come over to the hybrid console. But at the moment, the relationship between these two companies is Xbox gives and Nintendo takes. There's nothing being reciprocated on Nintendo's end. So is it possible that we could see a Nintendo IP make its way over to the Xbox as a test run? Now obviously this won't be along the lines of Mario or Zelda, but maybe we could see something like Bayonetta or Astral Chain, which are ironically both developed by Platinum Games. Speaking of Platinum Games, I wouldn't be surprised to see Xbox acquire a studio such as Platinum or something around the same size. Xbox has got to step their game up around the world, so if they could acquire a Japanese studio, there's no telling what they could do. Maybe they could try their hand at Atlus, but I'd like to see what they could do with a company like Konami. Konami is responsible for a massive library of rhythm games, which are a huge success in Japan compared to North America. I know this is a little far-fetched, but remember, I said this video wasn't gonna age well. What do you expect? But I guess you're wondering which console I would recommend at this point, and to be honest, I'm not exactly sure. If you play a plethora of games and jump from title to title, then Xbox is definitely the best option for you. With Game Pass being only $15 a month, I can't tell you this isn't one of the best deals out in video games. If you're into the massive collection that Sony has, definitely go with the PlayStation 5. Sucker Punch, Naughty Dog, Santa Monica, they've all done fantastic work and have consistently put out amazing title after title. But choosing which one I think's gonna edge out against the competition? I can't really give an exact answer on that. I left out a good bit that you might be wondering, like virtual reality, expanding to the mobile market, and creating new inventive services. But I think that's because in this first year, they're going to truly try to focus on optimizing the new hardware to the best of its ability. Games are becoming much bigger, much larger budget than ever before, so it's important to create a smooth yet engaging experience for players. We as a community tend to forget the mediocre experience, but if a title is extremely polished or extremely flawed, we're not going to forget that for years to come. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Bethesda. The beauty of a new console generation or even a new game announcement is you never know what's gonna happen next, whether it's gonna be a fantastic experience or an absolute disaster. The previous generation started out with Xbox forcing users to utilize Kinect and ended with PlayStation receiving some of the worst feedback for its underwhelming late life performance. But no matter how this console generation ends, I feel like it's important that us as a gaming community spend less time arguing over which console is better and try to come together to make the gaming industry as accessible and engaging as possible. Because we all know that the Switch is the superior system. Aim for the head. Just aim for the f***ing head. I don't care. Okay. Just aim for the head. Because we all know that the Switch is the superior system.